I sat, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pinpoint anything specific that would give me reason to believe she was cheating on me. The feeling that filled my being arose from the accumulation of many small things that mostly just made me feel uneasy. Something was happening, but I couldn't understand what exactly. I was absolutely sure that something was brewing, but I had no evidence. I had no idea who, what, or where it was happening, if it was indeed happening at all. I even began to doubt my own sanity. Was I attaching too much importance to what was happening? Maybe I was overreacting, imagining all sorts of scenarios where she was being unfaithful, but with whom? I had no clue, yet my gut was tied up in knots. I felt rather than knew that something was going on.
Welcome to the Dark Side channel. Dive into the world of human relationships, mistakes, and right decisions. Don't miss out. Subscribe and join our growing community.
Perhaps it was the beginning of an affair, maybe just a one-time thing. The more I tortured myself with thoughts and fantasies, the more strangely confident I became. I had been thinking like this for several weeks now, but how long had it been going on before I even began to slightly realize that something was amiss? I took another sip of my JD. The ice clinked in the glass, signaling me to pour some more. I caught the bartender's gaze and he nodded. He slid along the counter and replaced my glass with another double JD on the rocks. He gave me a slight smile as if reading my mind. He had seen this look many times before. In his eyes there was support and yet sympathy as he recognized the torment in my gaze. The sweet taste of JD warmed my mouth and throat as I took another sip. I needed to calm down, I decided, surveying the bar and noticing a handful of other drinkers. It was quiet. The murmurs of conversation just filled the room with indistinct words, adding to the background of my growing personal sense of despair. There was no joy here. The faces of the patrons filling the bar were nondescript. No one stood out, all plain and average in every way. The only woman in the establishment, appearing to be in her 40s, slightly overdressed for the time of day and place, looking perhaps a bit desperate, was being treated to drinks by an older guy. He seemed to be hoping for luck, and looking at her, he didn't need to try so hard. I figured she probably already had his number. Other souls seemed to just be killing time, while outside it rained, further dampening spirits, and soon each of them would run out of reasons to stay cocooned in the bar and head home. I still hadn't decided what I was going to do. So, what's the story? I turned towards the voice. She looked at me, her eyes penetrating deep into my soul. It seemed like I opened my mouth to speak but couldn't utter a word. She stood in the dimly lit bar, water dripping from her as she began to remove her coat. "What are you doing here, Sammy?" "I was worried about you, and I had a feeling I'd find you here, so here I am. Do you want to talk?" I looked at her, my mind trying to regain some semblance of balance as I stared at her. "Worried about me? Why? What do you mean?" I looked at her, trying to understand what she was thinking, wondering if she was somehow trying to trap me. Could I trust her? I took a sip of my JD and ordered her a vodka and Coke, which the bartender served with some flair, smiling at the sight of Sammy. She caught his gaze as he served her, offering one of her sweet, butter-wouldn't-melt smiles as his eyes lingered on her ample chest, accentuated by her tight blouse. Sammy waited until the bartender moved away before saying anything else. Her eyes were cautious as we tentatively looked at each other, jockeying for position and advantage. "Well, it's all about how you've been acting lately. You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Can't you just tell me what the hell is going on?" I glanced into her hazel eyes for a moment before looking away. She always knew how to read me like an open book. That's what I always liked about her. We clicked. We seemed to somehow understand each other. We had our arguments, but we never fought about anything. We were always straightforward and honest with each other. Well, up to a point. What remained unsaid was just understood. "Sammy, I'm fine and we're fine. There's really nothing for you to worry about." I looked at her as she took in my words. I could see she wasn't buying it. My heart sank and I tried to brush it off, but I could see it wasn't going to fly. Sammy took a slow sip from her glass and once again looked me straight in the eyes. Oh, God, here it comes, I thought. She placed the glass on the table in front of her, then interlocked her fingers and leaned forward slightly towards me. I know. What? I know what's going on. I don't understand what you mean, I tried to bluff. For heaven's sake, Steve, I know. So let's just be honest with each other and stop playing games. The bartender caught the last few words, his head turning just enough to try to catch more of what, as he presumed, should be something juicy. Shall we sit in one of the booths? It's too public here, in my opinion. I saw the disappointed look on the bartender's face as we got up and walked past the bar to one of the side booths. We sat across from each other, like prize fighters waiting for the other to throw a punch. All right, so what do you think you know? I sparred. Nice try, Steve. You know you can't lie to me. We've known each other too long, and I know, so spill it. You know you need to talk to someone, so let's hear it. I'd known Sammy since I was 17. She'd always been there, and at one point, she'd kind of had a thing for me when I started dating her sister, Claire. Claire was 3 years older, and we started dating when we were both 20. Sammy and I always got along, much to her older sister's chagrin. They were as different as chalk and cheese in many ways, but their temperaments were similar, leading to numerous squabbles between the sisters over the years. 2 years later, Claire and I got married and embarked on what I thought was an idyllic future. We both had decent jobs and made enough to at least make life comfortable. My sister-in-law, Sammy, had a fun time in her late teens and early 20s and was now, at 25, looking for something more mature. I felt like she'd sown all her wild oats already and had turned into someone any guy would be lucky to get close to. Claire and I had been married for 5 years. Well, it'll be 5 next month when our anniversary rolls around. If we make it that far, I mused. Sammy was a very attractive woman, someone I considered a friend as well as my sister-in-law. I looked at her, tears beginning to well up in my eyes as I searched for words to explain how I felt. But her words, I know, still rang loud and clear in my head. She reached across the table, her fingers grazing mine before clasping them tightly, a gesture of support and more as I felt my heart slowly breaking. All right, Steve, if you won't say it, then I will. She's cheating on you. I think you know that. Now, what are you going to do about it? My eyes widened as I heard those words, but I still refused to comprehend, stubbornly trying to figure out what I knew and what it meant. I didn't want to hear any more. In my mind, if I truly didn't know, then it couldn't be happening, and therefore couldn't cause me pain. I also wouldn't have to deal with it. Sammy looked at me. She saw the glazed look I gave her. Was it shock or denial? Steve, I love you dearly, but for heaven's sake, wake up. I'm sure it's some sort of misunderstanding or something. I tried to push her away, also trying to delude myself even more. Sammy's eyes suddenly flashed with anger. She reached out and slapped me across the face damn hard. The bartender looked at me, ceasing to wipe the glass he held in his hand. Is everything okay over there? I raised my hand. Yes, of course. No problem here. I brought my hand to my cheek. It was burning from the slap, and I was sure there was a perfect imprint of Sammy's hand there too. Sorry, Steve, but you sometimes drive me crazy. You know how much I care about you, and it's unbearable for me to see you in such pain. So be wise and brave. This is happening, and we need to do something about it. I swallowed, rubbing my cheek, and the full seriousness of my situation began to sink in as the pain from her slap pierced my brain. Okay, I'll start. I'm sure you at least suspect something, but I'll continue anyway. A few weeks ago, I was with her when her mobile rang. She left the room to answer, which was a strange move, right? We're sisters, for heaven's sake. What could she be hiding from me? I nodded, fearing the worst, but as I took a sip of my JD, she continued. I just thought it was odd, so when I had the chance, I checked her phone. She's so trusting. There's no passcode on it. The call was from a guy who was in her contacts and introduced himself as Robert. I didn't know any Robert or Bob, but I thought I'd keep an eye out for any repeats. So who was this guy, Robert or Bob? I asked, trying to rack my brains for any information about that name. I actually found out who he was. roughly about a week later. He's a guy she knew many years ago, even before she started dating you. Anyway, it seems he reached out to us through one of those social networks or chat sites or something like that. It seems they've been messaging each other for a few weeks now. But I knew nothing about this. All I knew was that there seemed to be some oddities that somehow stood out.
Yeah, I know. But all of that was part of what they were doing. Nothing obvious, but it just seemed like things were falling into place for them. So it's just a couple of friends catching up, reminiscing about old times or something like that? Yeah, seems like it. Anyway, that's how it all started. You mean to say something happened? Yeah, you mean to say you didn't notice anything suspicious? Only that it seemed like circumstances conspired to keep us apart, and of course the glaring lack of opportunity for fun. Sammy looked at me with a skeptical expression, as if I were being foolish. What? I stared back at her. Steve, I love you dearly, but damn it, get your head out of your ass. Reality was sinking deeper into my numbed brain as her words became more and more real with each passing minute. Damn, I thought. This is serious. I took another sip and gathered my courage. How far do you think this has gone? Or do you know? Sammy looked at me. Her eyes flickered, averting for a split second. That was all the answer I needed. When? How? Where? I asked quickly. My mind was now playing catch-up as I felt rage boiling inside me. A race between logic, common sense, and pure animal fury had begun. I know she's met him at least 3 times in the past 2 weeks. At first I wasn't sure, and it was only 2 days ago that I found out for sure that it was progressing. I had lunch with one of my friends who works with Claire, and she let something slip. At the time, I played it cool, and she covered it well, so I let it go over my head. Turns out she's met him for lunch twice, and at least once for dinner one evening last week. Does that match what you've noticed? I looked at her, absorbing her words. There were a couple of times recently when I called her at the office to arrange lunch, and she wasn't there or had just left. Was that when she met him? Then last week she had a seminar which she absolutely had to attend, announced late and scheduled after work. She came home late that night, after midnight. Looking back, she said it ran late, and the team went for drinks at the hotel bar to unwind before leaving. I also remembered there was no sex that night, and she took a shower before bed too. My mind was racing. My brain was swirling as I processed these hurtful facts, each one adding to the agony and twisting the knife that had firmly lodged itself in my heart. To hell with all of this! I suddenly spat out. Sammy looked at me, and now her eyes reflected concern. Steve, what are you going to do? Don't do anything stupid that'll get you in trouble with the law. I looked at her, and from the expression on her face I could tell she noticed the change. My face felt like stone, and my heart was now a granite block. My body was gearing up for what was about to happen, and she could see it. To hell with all of this! I absolutely will not stand for it. This will stop. I'll put an end to it. There's no room in my life for a cheating bitch. She'll pay. He'll pay too. My eyes glazed over as rage boiled inside me. My muscles tensed and my fists clenched. I was never a violent guy. I had my fair share of confrontations when I was younger, but I never sought trouble. Sometimes you just have to step forward and face the truth, and that's what I was doing now. I just got a bit out of practice, that's all. But that was going to change, and fast. Steve, whatever you're thinking, take a step back. Think it through and don't rush into anything without a plan, or it'll all go to hell. You need to think and prepare, or you'll end up getting burned in the end. Her words seeped into my anger. They penetrated the rational part of my brain and made sense. Strangely, it helped me calm down a bit and realize that what I suspected was indeed true, so at least I wasn't going crazy. Do you think she's there right now? I looked at Sammy. I saw her eyes welling up with tears, and a tear began its solitary journey down her pretty face. Yeah, I know she's with him right now. That's why I came looking for you. I felt the rage boiling inside me again and slammed my fist on the table. Several people in the bar turned and looked. I raised my hand to the bartender, and he once again bestowed upon me that half-smile. How the hell did he know? Do you know exactly where? I asked, more with hope than anything else. No, I have no idea, but I'll meet up with my friend again tomorrow and find out what I can. I know he's married and has a couple of kids, though I'm not sure where he lives.
but I'll do whatever I can to find out, if it helps. I reached for her hand, holding it tightly, and wiped a tear from her cheek. Thank you, Sammy. I know this is hard for you, but I really appreciate it. Truly appreciate it. What are you going to do? She looked at me with concern.
I know I can't do what I want, at least not yet, but I'll stop this. When I do, it'll be final, and there'll be no retribution, no guilt, but they'll both pay. In the meantime, I'll secure what's mine. Get the evidence I need to decide what to do next. Sammy looked worriedly at me as I finished my JD. I caught the bartender's eye, and he poured us another round. As he approached, I saw Sammy wanting to say something. I raised my hand to stop her until the drinks were served. I slipped him a bill. Keep the change, I said. He nodded and walked away. So how long before you come face to face with her? I need to think this through. I'll make a couple of calls tomorrow while I handle my assets. She won't get a penny from me if I can catch her. Not a damn penny. You know it's going to be hard for you to be around her, right? Yeah, I get that. But in a way, it's been like that for the past few weeks anyway. I guess if she hasn't noticed by now, she won't see any changes. Sammy downed her drink and got up. I gotta go, Steve. Can we talk again tomorrow? I'll find out everything I can for you. She put on her coat again. I stood up and helped her, feeling her press against me. Damn! She looked so much like her sister. She looked up at me and I saw tears in her eyes as I kissed her on the cheek. Go home. I'll be okay. I'll call you tomorrow. She smiled and turned away, and I watched her walk out the door into the dark, damp evening. I sighed deeply and sat down, contemplating what to do next. One thing was clear for sure. They'll pay, and it'll be quick, ruthless, and relentless. I don't remember much after that. Somehow I woke up in my own bed with a mouth that felt like the bottom of a parrot's cage. My head was still spinning as I lifted it from the bed. Rolling over, I noticed I was alone, and Claire was nowhere to be seen. My senses slowly awakened as I heard noise downstairs. Swinging my legs off the bed, I tried to stand. Oh God, what did I do to myself last night? I thought. Staggering, I made it to the bathroom and started to recover from the aftermath of my JD cloud. I descended downstairs in a haze of pain, every joint aching. It seemed like everything hurt. Peering into the kitchen, I saw her. Hey, babe, what were you up to last night to get in such a state? Don't you want to know, you bitch? Had a drink with an old friend, that's all. Got carried away. I sat down, poured myself some orange juice, gulped it down, and went for another. Oh, really? Who was it? Anyone I know? My mind kicked into gear. No, I don't think so. It was Bob. I knew him way back. Haven't seen him in years. And he came to town for a couple of days on business. Bob? Something flickered across her face as she turned. Yeah, I'm sure I mentioned it before. We went to college together, played soccer for a couple of years. Tall guy, dark-haired. He was asking about you anyway. Claire looked puzzled. Sorry, I don't recall any Bob, but hey, as long as you had fun, strike one. She sat across from me at the table. I looked at her, recalling my conversation with Sammy yesterday. So, darling, what were you up to last night? Anything exciting? What time did you get home? She looked me in the eye as she lied to me. Oh, nothing much, really. I finished work. Then we went for a bite to eat and a drink. I was home by 9:30. I started to worry about you, but then remembered you had a late meeting. I knew by then she hadn't been home yet, because I was still home at 10 p.m. That's when I had my fill and headed to the bar. Strike two. I've got some stuff I need to take care of this morning, so I'll shower and hit the road. I might be late tonight, so don't wait up. Bob said he'll be in touch. We've got some catching up to do. You'll have to invite him over if he's staying in town for a few days. It's nice to catch up with old friends. Sure. I'll make sure to do that. You must remember him fondly? She looked at me blankly. Her face tried not to react, not to give anything away, but she felt something, I could tell. Maybe it'll come back to me later, darling. For now, get a move on or you'll be late. Want me to drive? You were pretty tipsy last night. No, I'm fine. I still need to catch a cab and pick up my car.
since I remember leaving it at the bar, so thanks anyway. I went to get dressed, downing some more orange juice and a couple of painkillers. I left the house 30 minutes later, as Claire was getting ready. I had a busy day ahead of me. One thing I was sure of: this wouldn't last long. I gritted my teeth at the thought of Claire with that Bob character. My fists clenched. He was going to pay, and I was going to crush the bastard. The work was chaotic. Call after call came in to sort out issues on the line. My secretary handled some of them, but there were meetings I had to attend, so I couldn't dodge any of them. By mid-morning, the initial rush settled down, and I had a bit of almost free time to deal with my personal issues. I closed the door to my office and began checking my financials. Within 15 minutes, I tightened the purse strings and stashed some cash out of reach. I also arranged to meet with a lawyer to discuss a potential divorce. I still had a few days before that, so I figured it'd give me time to gather more information. Not that it mattered much anyway, but it could give me some leverage. Claire had her own bank account and credit card, so nothing needed to be done there. The issue was access to our joint account, but I quickly closed that loophole. So if it came to it, she wouldn't be able to get more than what was left. My own account was secure, with only a small balance, the rest stashed away and safe. We didn't have kids, so essentially, it would be a clean break if it came to that. I quietly resolved that we could only overcome this if Claire, so to speak, came clean and asked for forgiveness. Shows some restraint, and it's all over between us. The thought saddened me. I sat silently at my desk, reflecting on what had happened and the actions I'd taken today. Did I need more information about Bob's character and evidence? Or would the fact that I knew about it be enough to truly nail them both? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Yeah? It's me, Sammy. How's it going, Steve? Oh, busy with stuff, thoughts, plans, all that and more. Can't quite figure out why, but I've started to move forward. I found out more about this guy from my friend. His name's Bob Stones, and he's married. I also have his address and where he works. I managed to get this without tipping them off. My friend knows Claire and recently saw her with him. From what she says, they're really getting cozy with each other. No matter how hard they try to hide it, the signs are there, she says. She saw them together? I asked. Yeah, they were at the Ramada the other night after the seminar. They stayed after everyone else left. She said they looked cozy with each other. Well, at least it's a start. I'm sure there are surveillance cameras there if we need them. Anyway, give me his details. I need to deal with this. It's eating me up inside, and I don't know how long I can hold it together. Sammy provided his details, and within minutes, I found his social media page and got his photo. That's when it seemed like I remembered his face. It was familiar, but where and when had I seen that face before? I glanced at the clock. It was almost lunchtime, and I decided to call Claire, maybe to meet up or just to hash things out a bit. My heart sank as I dialed. A knot in my stomach felt like it was about to unravel as I heard her answer. Hey, darling, she cooed, recognizing my number. Hi, baby. What are you doing for lunch? I thought maybe we could meet up if you're free. Oh, sorry, honey. I have a meeting in 30 minutes that will last until the end of the day. I was planning to grab a quick bite at the deli nearby. That's okay. What's the meeting about? Anything exciting? Same old routine with a new client, that's all. I think it's Mr. Stones. Her words pierced me like a knife. Damn, she practically threw it in my face who it was. I held my breath for a few seconds, trying to keep myself together. Darling, are you there? Her voice came through the headset. Yeah, I'm here, you fucking bitch. Brace yourself for the third strike. You and Mr. fucking Stones will get what's coming to you very soon. No fucking delays and no mercy. It's going to be scorched earth. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm here. Sorry, something just distracted me, something I was just thinking about. Listen, I need to go, and I know you need to get ready for your meeting too, so have fun, and I'll see you later. Okay, bye. Love you. Bye. I hung up. I was boiling with anger, sitting there grinding my teeth when my secretary poked her head in the door. Steve, I'm heading to that deli down the street. Want me to get you something? I paused for a moment. Yeah, get me anything. Surprise me. Just make sure it's big, hearty, and with a lot of red meat inside. I feel like sinking my teeth into something. She looked at me strangely and nodded. As she closed the door, she felt like her boss was acting a bit off. He'd been locked up all morning, businesslike, sure, but there was something else. Something brewing. She just knew it. Sammy called her sister's office and, entering the lobby, saw her sister emerge from the elevator and head towards the entrance door next to a tall, dark-haired man. He appeared to be around 30, a couple of years older. She recognized him after seeing his photo on the internet. Bob Stones! She stood in front of her sister, who jumped in surprise upon seeing her. "Sammy, what are you doing here?" Sammy looked at her sister, noticing her discomfort at having her obvious plans disrupted. "Just thought I'd drop by to see my sister and maybe grab lunch." She smiled innocently. "Well, Mr. Stones and I have a business lunch, so maybe another time?" He extended his hand to her. "Bob Stones, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Stones. How long have you known Claire?" He looked a bit puzzled by her question. Claire began to pull her away. "Listen, Sammy, we need to go. We have a meeting. We'll catch up soon." Sammy smiled as she watched the couple walk out the door and get into the waiting taxi. She noticed her sister glance back at her as it drove off. I sat in my office chewing on a huge slice of pie. It was filled with red meat, and I smiled to myself, slowly biting into it, savoring and contemplating my next steps. Sammy confirmed that Claire had left her office, so I called her secretary and learned she wouldn't be in all day. Isn't that just freaking great? As for my finances, everything was sorted out. I had a locksmith on speed dial, and I had already arranged for what was needed. My lawyer was on standby, ready to act as soon as I provided him with the remaining information he requested. All right, tonight was supposed to be the first stage. I was planning to really mess with this couple for a while before pulling the trigger. My old man always told me, "Don't let them know you're coming after them. Just stick to route number 1. Be straightforward and annihilate those bastards." The man had few, if any, minced words. Maybe it was something I recently forgot, but it was coming back, damn it. It was on its way. That evening, I was at home. When Claire walked in the door, she looked fine. Nothing out of the ordinary, and she smelled fine too until I went to kiss her. There was an unmistakable scent of men's cologne, faint but noticeable. She noticed me sniffing. I didn't say anything, just lightly kissed her on the cheek and headed for the door. "Where are you going? Are you all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine. There's an issue I need to deal with, that's all. Just stopping by Jerry's. He invited me to play poker with a couple of guys from work. Thought it might do me some good. Won't be too late." With that, I closed the door behind me and, gritting my teeth, got into my car and slid down the driveway. I drove to Jerry's, pulled up to his house, and he ushered me through the door into his garage. Jerry and I go way back. He always went with the flow, and he had his run-ins with the law in the past. But given his particular combat training, he was the perfect ally for what I had in mind. You don't mess with a cage fighter. Jerry was a big guy, standing at 6'3" and weighing 200 pounds, all muscle. Not the kind of guy you want to mess with, believe me. With a character to match his size, he was intimidating, but we'd been solid friends since school. I'd called Jerry earlier, and he offered his help in any way, no questions asked. I needed that kind of support. We quickly slipped into the garage, and I changed into a dark jumpsuit and ski mask to match. We looked like two mime artists standing there staring at each other. Not a word was spoken as we got into an inconspicuous used car he'd acquired. There was nothing remarkable about it. Slowly making our way across town to the address Sammy gave me, we still didn't say a word. We'd agreed on the plan beforehand, so there was no need for further discussion. Jerry parked the car near Bob Stone's house. There were no signs of life, and only one light was on, which we could see. We waited in silence as the front door opened. We watched as he came out, got into his car, and drove off down the road. Jerry followed him at a safe distance, and we already knew where he was heading, so there was no rush or panic. There were no issues with parking at the training field. We stayed in the car while Bob Stone went for his usual bucket of 50 balls. Obviously, he did this every week. It's amazing what you can find out on the internet if you know where to look. We got comfortable. The radio was on, and Kenny Rogers was softly crooning when Jerry looked at me as the words poured out of the radio. He reached over and turned it off. We sat, watching and waiting. The tension inside me was almost unbearable. It was hard to stay still, not to walk around and fidget, but that would have been risky. The parking lot began to empty until only a couple of other cars were left. We both tensed as we saw him heading back to his car. Jerry got out of the car and stealthily made his way toward the target. Bob Stone was still going through the final throes of his training when he lifted the lid of his trunk and placed the clubs inside. Jerry lifted and stuffed him into the trunk along with the clubs. A precise punch to the jaw was enough to make him shut up. The cage fighter Jerry took charge, and for the next 30 seconds, Bob Stone experienced intense pain in the trunk of his own car. Satisfied that he'd used the human punching bag enough, Jerry turned his attention to Stone's groin, and soon several punches from Jerry made him yelp before he lost consciousness. He slammed the lid shut and quickly returned to the car, where I smoothly, without fuss, drove us out of the parking lot. Everything went very smoothly, reflected Jerry, removing his gloves and mask. Thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate this. Don't worry, buddy. Any time. I still owe you and could never repay you for what you've done for me. Well, that's what friends are for. At least you didn't break your hands. And there were no surveillance cameras in the parking lot, so as they say, the job's done. Let's head back and start that card game. The others will already be there. We drove back, and for the next 4 hours, we played poker, just for fun, without high stakes. We were buddies, and buddies don't cheat each other. The atmosphere was good. All the guys knew what was going on and supported me all the way, which made me feel good because, as I knew, I would soon have to deal with Claire too. But first, I was going to mess with her head. Stumbling, I walked in the door just after 1 in the morning. I exaggerated how much I had been drinking, and Jerry asked one of the guys to drive my car. Claire wasn't asleep and was waiting. I thought it was time for an award-winning performance. Darling, why aren't you asleep? I told you I'd be a little late. Are you okay? She looked at me sharply. Jerry and the guys just dropped me off in my car, afraid I'd hit JD a little too hard again. I threw my jacket on the coat rack with a thud and missed. Flopping onto the couch, I looked at her. Claire sat, arms crossed, with an expression of disgust on her face. I stared at her with wide eyes, my expression blank. What? She just snorted. She was bursting to say something. Come on, spill it, bitch. What's going on, Steve? Is there someone else or something else? Lately you've been acting really strange. I laughed. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I swallowed it back. Patience, Steve. Take a cold pill. I'm okay, my petal. I've just been going through a rough patch lately, that's all. It'll be over soon. Claire looked at me. My words were swirling in her head. I could see it. She wasn't sure, but something was definitely up. We went to bed. I pretended to be out cold and apparently almost immediately fell asleep. That angered her, and she was ready to go off, but I wasn't playing. The next morning, Claire got up first and made coffee, while I thundered down the stairs, behaving disgustingly as if I had a hangover. I barged into the kitchen. Good morning, darling. How are you? Oh my, I've got my head screwed on again. Is there anything I can take for it? She tossed some headache remedy at me as I sipped my coffee. She seemed calm. I noticed her phone on the kitchen table and wondered if anyone had called her. Claire saw me looking at her phone, and I could tell she wanted to reach for it, but that would seem odd. I poured myself some more orange juice and casually picked up the phone, noticing a flicker of panic on her face. So, she somehow got a message. I quickly glanced at it before sliding it over to her. Needs charging, my love. Don't want any messages going unanswered because of a dead battery. I left the kitchen and went to get dressed. Claire watched me as if she knew something was up, and Bob hadn't messaged her this morning like he had been for the past couple of weeks. He couldn't know, could he? She pushed that thought away. She couldn't be so careless, and it had only been a few weeks. Just a few lunches, dinners 3 times as well, and of course, the hotel, which also happened 3 times. Really, she thought there was nothing to it, just harmless fun, and Steve would never find out. After all, he wasn't planning on leaving her, right? That suddenly made her wonder, when was the last time she had sex with her husband? Oh my, she couldn't remember. Maybe that was it. She needed to do something about it, and fast. She had been so consumed with Bob that she missed what was right in front of her, the only sure thing that could raise suspicions with Steve. I tumbled down the stairs and nearly flew out the door as Claire futilely tried to grab me for a deeper kiss than usual. None of that was happening, damn it. I waved her off and grinned as I pulled out of the driveway, heading to work. Around 11 in the morning, I thought I'd send Claire a message just for fun. Sorry about today, sweetheart. Got a lot on my mind, but things will sort out soon. Love you. I leaned back in my chair, waiting for something to happen. Right after lunch, Sammy called to meet up. Steve, what the hell happened? What are you talking about, Sammy? Bob Stone was found beaten up in the trunk of his car by one of the golf club staff earlier today. Claire told me about it. She's shocked, truly shaken. I told her these things sometimes happen in our days, and it's awful when it's someone we know, but it's not worth dwelling on too much. You did this, didn't you? Oh, God, is he badly hurt? Anyway, I can't say I feel too bad about it, but no, I didn't lay a finger on him. Well, he's just a bit beaten up. I heard a few cuts and bruises, but seems like nothing's broken. You asked how she found out. Yeah, she said she had a meeting scheduled with him today, and they called from his company saying he's in the hospital. His wife called them. That's very sweet, also plausible, but sweet. Maybe next time it won't be so easy for all of them. What do you mean, Steve? Accidents happen in the strangest places. That night when I got home, Claire wasn't there. Her car was gone, and there were no messages. Damn bitch. I called her phone. Where are you, sweetheart? I asked cheerfully. Oh, I'm at the hospital visiting a friend. Be back soon, just on my way now. All right, hope she's getting better. Anyway, see you soon, darling. Love you, bye. I hung up before she could reply. 30 minutes later, she returned home. Her face looked gray and worn. How's your friend doing? Hope it's not too serious and she'll be out of there soon. Claire looked at me as if she wanted to say something but thought better of it. Oh yeah, nothing too dramatic about it. She just fell and got a few nasty bruises. We'll be home in a few days. That's good. Coffee? Yes, please. Claire looked at me, sipping her coffee. The other night, one of the reps from my company was attacked, she said, leaving the statement hanging, waiting for a reaction. Oh God, really? What happened? He was beaten up and left overnight in his car. Oh God, that's awful. I hope the police catch whoever did it. Is he okay? Well, luckily, Bob wasn't too badly hurt. It just seems like they wanted to beat him up for no reason. Nothing was stolen. Bullseye. That's the same Bob you claim not to know, you bitch. She saw me looking at her and realized she'd slipped up. She tried to cover it, but she knew it was too late. Now she also knew that I knew. She hurriedly headed for the exit to change. I suspected she might approach the phone at any moment, but who to? I decided I needed to revise my plan, as everything was now moving faster. I needed to kickstart things a bit. I called out to Claire as she ascended the stairs, telling her I needed to step out briefly so she wouldn't worry, and that I'd be back shortly. I drove to Bob Stone's home address and knocked on the door. It swung open, revealing a petite, dark-haired woman. Mrs. Stone, you don't know me, but I need to tell you something quite delicate in nature. May I come in for a moment? She looked at me nervously, yet intrigued and wary at the same time. I'm Steve Ryland. My wife's name is Claire Ryland, and she has dealings with your husband. I paused as realization and horror dawned on her face. She stepped back from the door and ushered me inside into the living room. I take it this has something to do with both of them? I could already see the pain growing in her eyes. Yes, I'm afraid so. They've been having an affair, and I found out a few days ago. I'm sorry to have to break this to you. I also know that he's currently in the hospital. She seemed to inwardly shrink, her head dropping to her chest, and tears flowed easily for a few seconds. I knew it! I fucking knew he was up to his old tricks again. She spat. I'm going to divorce Claire. She's had enough chances to come clean, and I can't stand her lies anymore. I'm not sure how long this has been going on, but I'm satisfied she betrayed me, and I can't forgive or forget. Does this have anything to do with the beating he took last night? I looked into her pleading eyes and quickly made a decision about my actions. I don't know about that. I didn't lay a finger on him. For me, it happened so fast, I'm still in shock myself. Could he also have been fooling around with someone else's wife? Nothing surprises me. Well, he can keep his sorry ass on the other side of my front door. I'm done with him. That's why we came back here, because he was cheating. I left her still seething after giving her the number of my locksmith and my lawyer, too. Dear Lord, what a mess. I hopped into my car and headed to the hospital, which was just a 10-minute drive away. I made it there quicker. I breezed through the lobby, almost smiling as if a layer of stress was peeling off me. I squeezed into the elevator and ascended to the 4th-floor room where a Mr. Bob Stones was located. I checked the patient list and found him in a side room. Slipping past the nurse's station unnoticed, I entered his room and carefully closed the door behind me. When I entered, he looked at me questioningly. I approached his bed, looking at his bandaged face. One eye was covered, the other swollen and bloodshot, and he looked at me, trying to focus. Jerry did a really good job, I thought, surveying him. You look like you don't recognize me, Bob. Take a moment. I'll give you time. I smiled at him as he comically stared at me. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he looked at me through the bandages on his face. I could only see one very black and swollen eye, and it seemed he had jaw issues too. No matter. I looked at the raised bedsheet, holding the weight of his lower body. Wow, that looks awful. Painful, isn't it? I said, grabbing his emergency call button and tossing it under the bed. I jabbed him in the ribs, and he squealed like a little pig. So you did manage to figure out who I might be, Bob? Want a hint? The same bewildered look on half of his face in the bed. Let me think. Oh yes, this might help. How about you think about all the married women you've fucked and how many marriages you've wrecked? That's a pretty good starting point, isn't it? His eyes looked at me, and I could tell his mind was racing as he tried to piece together the puzzle. Another minute passed as I waited, relishing in his pain and confusion. Another hint, little Bobby. Try this one. I'm married to a woman named Claire. Ring any bells? I saw the light bulb go off as he realized who I was. There you go. You got it all figured out now, right? I smiled like a tiger before lunch. He nodded slowly. I'm glad we cleared that up. I bet you're wondering why I'm here, aren't you? Yes, of course you are. Well, I've come to deliver a message from your wife. I paused, waiting for him to grasp it, and then emitted a throaty sound. Seemingly his throat was damaged, so he couldn't speak very clearly anyway. She said to send you. Clear enough for you, huh? Get lost. Don't come back. Divorce papers will be sent in the mail. Oh, and by the way, fuck off. I saw a tear trickle from the only eye I could see. I started laughing. He couldn't move, and I laughed some more. Watching him struggle, I leaned over him and peered into his single eye. I'm divorcing my bitch of a wife because she fucked scum like you, and this is just the beginning for you, my friend. We'll meet many more times, you can be sure of that. I'll ruin your life like you ruined mine. I'll never stop, so start running. Oh, and by the way, I didn't do this just for you to know. I wanted him to ponder who did. I raised my fist as he watched, and I struck hard at his only uncovered eye. I felt something crunch, it didn't matter. And then another quick blow to the groin. He screamed, then lost consciousness. I stood up and left the room. Satisfied? Not in the slightest, but it was a start. He could lie there, knowing he messed up, and couldn't do anything about it. No one saw me leave, and if they did, they would have seen a wide grin on my face. I drove home slowly to address the second half of my problem. My inner anger was under control, as once revenge began, it was just a plan of action that would run its course. One I would follow and mostly enjoy. It was sad at the end of my marriage, but as painful as it was at the time, I knew there was no going back after her betrayal. My only solace was that the parties who caused me pain would experience it to a much greater extent. I don't forgive. Bob Stone's card had a note that we would meet again. I parked my car on the driveway leading to the house. Claire's car was parked where she had left it no more than 2 hours ago, and I absent-mindedly tapped the hood as I passed it on my way to the front door. I inserted my key into the lock, thinking that perhaps this was the last time I would do it as a married man. Suddenly, my heart sank as I stepped inside. It was as if all the worries of the past few days had suddenly become real, and incredibly heavy on my shoulders as I slowly made my way to the living room. Approaching the door, I heard the murmuring of the TV in the corner of the room. I stood still, staring at her. Claire was sitting on the couch, perched. Fear and apprehension were evident in her demeanor, as if she was expecting the axe to fall any moment. There was a sense of something being amiss, as if the game was over but nothing had been said yet. She trembled with anticipation, trying to maintain composure, and I stood there watching her. She looked up, and I saw fear in her eyes. Her mouth tried to form words, but nothing came out. I entered the room, then walked past her, preparing myself a drink. I placed my glass of JD with plenty of ice on the coffee table between us and sat down. My eyes were fixed on her, absorbing her fear, and perhaps I too sensed a hint of defiance. I didn't say anything as I reached for my drink and took a slow sip. The drink warmed the back of my throat as it slid down, and my eyes, unwavering, bore into her. She waited. Let this bitch wait, I thought, taking another sip. Still, silence. My face remained expressionless as I observed the woman I had once loved so deeply staring back at me. My heart still held deep feelings for her, but now balanced by the pain she had caused me without just cause. Now, she too would begin to feel my pain. I stared at her, but she saw nothing in my face that gave her any reason for optimism. So much had been said between us without any words at all. Claire, it seemed, pulled herself together and straightened up, evidently deciding to show some audacity. She had no idea what I knew, and she could no longer bear the accusing silence. "Where did you go?" Her eyes betrayed her concern as I sat still and silent. "Talk to me, damn it," she stammered. I took another slow sip of my JD. I really love JD after a stressful day, I thought, watching her grow increasingly tense. "What's wrong with you, Steve?" she hissed, getting irritated by my silent treatment. "All right, Claire, I'll tell you where I went if you tell me where you were, deal?" I said. She looked at me uncertainly and cautiously, her mind working faster, like two prize fighters weighing each other up, unsure who would make the first move, fearing a counterattack. "I told you I was at the hospital visiting a friend. What does this all mean?" She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed over her chest, pleased with her first move. I took another slow sip of my JD. Darling, I just knew you'd say that. Want to try again?" She watched my impassive speech, and I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Now she was scared. "I was with my friend, like I said. What's wrong with you?" And again, she thought she had dodged the question and turned it back on me. "All right, Claire, enough of this nonsense. I'll tell you where I went, okay? It'll be easier for you to understand where we're heading." I myself was visiting a friend. I hadn't known her for very long, but what I had to tell her was really important. I hadn't even met her before, but I can say that now we're somewhat friends. I watched her face closely. I could tell she was trying to hold herself together, but when she jutted her chin out, her defiant look gave her away. "I had an enlightening conversation with her about her husband, Bob Stones. Maybe you've heard of him?" I saw the curtain start to fall. "It seems her husband got into an accident and ended up in the hospital. Nothing serious, just a few quite unpleasant bruises, so he'll live. So that's good, isn't it?" Claire's face flared up as she felt the net closing in around her while I played with her. "What? What did you want to talk about with this Mrs. Stones?" Claire asked, knowing the answer but afraid to hear it from my lips. "It seems her husband is a serial philanderer, a skirt chaser, a cheater, or whatever you call it. Anyway, I found out he's been cheating, and I felt she had the right to know." "Oh my God," she gasped, feeling something tighten around her throat, as if a noose was closing in. "Are you all right, darling? Can I offer you something to drink?" "Do you know anything about Bob Stone's affairs, my love?" I sipped my drink as she struggled to find words. Her mouth wouldn't cooperate and nothing came out. "Let me help you here." I stared deeply into her eyes, wishing she could see my deepest feelings right now. I know. Her eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth as the realization hit her hard. I watched her face as she looked back at me, shock, disbelief, and much more, as she sought some kind of support, but found nothing on my face. "I know about you and Bobby, babe. I've known for a while, not long, but long enough. So if you've got something to say, I suggest you do it now before you walk away." I emptied my glass and stood up to pour more. "Sure you don't want a drink?" I asked, much calmer than I felt, given the circumstances. She nodded. I poured us both a hefty portion and leaned back in the chair opposite her. Claire took a big gulp and then looked at me. "It didn't mean anything. You know, it was just sex. It was just sex. Yeah, it was. It didn't mean a damn thing, right? Do we forget the vows we both made?" I felt anger boiling inside me when she mentioned the cliché of the cheater. "But it was just sex, Steve. It just happened." "Get lost, you dumb bitch. It never just happens like that. Usually 2 people decide to have sex, they plan it, they agree to take off their clothes and screw each other senseless. Don't treat me like a fool. You and Bobby made me a cuckold for a few weeks or maybe months, but no longer. Go to hell, both of you." "It was only twice, and it wasn't even that great." "Yeah, the thought was exciting, but actually doing it wasn't fun at all because I was constantly worried you might find out." "Well, bitch, I did find out after all. So I hope it was worth our marriage." "I'm sorry, Steve. Really sorry. It meant nothing, and we can get through this. I'll make it up to you and do whatever you say." I heard my laughter, loud and maniacal, as she stared at me, and the realization just hit her that this could be serious. It was a mistake. "We can fix this. I'm sorry." "Yeah, sure. You're my love. Sorry you got caught. Would you have stopped if you hadn't been caught?" "I doubt it. All those old clichés just roll off the tongue of a cheater so easily. Just like all the lies you've been telling me and everyone else since this started. It becomes your second nature. The only person who believes your lies here is you. Frankly, you're not the woman I fell in love with and married. I don't recognize you anymore." She looked at me as those words and the depth of my hurt began to penetrate her deceptive facade. Damn, this was serious. "What can I do, Steve? I'll do anything?" "Nothing, we're done. While I was away, I called Sammy, by the way. She knows too. She'll be here in a few minutes to take you." "But where will I go? You're kicking me out?" Shock started to dawn on her face. "You can go wherever you damn please, you cheating bitch. Even back to the hospital to see your guy. I don't care, as long as you get the hell out. We're finished." I finished my drink and slammed the glass down on the table to emphasize the end of the conversation. Claire sat there, stunned, as a knock sounded at the door. I got up, went and greeted Sammy. "How did it go?" she asked as we entered the living room, looking at her sister, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking. "Just get this bitch out of here, Sammy. Sorry to be blunt, but if she doesn't leave, I'm afraid of what I'll do. As much as I hate what she's done, I still care about her. Please, hurry. Thank you for this, Sammy, and I'll be in touch soon." I poured myself another drink as Sammy bustled about, gathering Claire's things for the next few days. I listened to my wife sobbing, watching her sister pack her belongings and stuff them into a couple of suitcases. It took less than 10 minutes to get her out of my house. The longer battle would be to erase her from my life forever and erase the pain. Revenge will help with that. That was all I had left to look forward to now, along with another stiff JD. I watched the flames of the funeral pyre I'd built in the backyard. Everything that belonged to Claire was now ablaze. I wouldn't let that bitch back into my home for anything. "Fuck off, bitch." I finished the bottle and tossed it into the fire.